It circled the cabin slowly once, twice, always staying just beyond the light. For over an hour we heard it pacing, sometimes closer, sometimes farther. At one point, something brushed against the side of the RV wall. The hollow metal gave a faint thunk. Across time, one story keeps returning, of something that walks like a man, but moves like a wolf. Some call it a werewolf. Others, the Dogman. Witnesses describe the same thing. Towering frame, glowing eyes, and a presence that feels wrong. Too aware. These aren't just legends from the past. People still see them right here in our forests and small towns. So tonight, we're not chasing myths. We're listening to the ones who've seen what shouldn't exist. Because once you've looked into those eyes, you never really forget them. I've told this story maybe 3 times, and every time I wish I hadn't. Not because I'm afraid of being called crazy, I'm used to that by now, but because whenever I say it out loud, I'm back there again, back in those mountains. The Catskills have a kind of silence that feels alive, like the trees are listening. My girlfriend and I had booked a few days in this odd little Airbnb, half RV, half cabin, sitting on the edge of a dirt road carved into the mountain. From the deck, you could see the valley fall away below, and beyond that, the faint shimmer of cornfields that looked like rivers under moonlight. The cabin itself had 2 fire pits, one close by and one way up the hill. The upper pit had the view. We'd saved it for the last night. Our dog, a big German shepherd, about 100 pounds, was stretched out near the fire, tongue out happy. We were playing music through a little Bluetooth speaker, the kind that always sounds too small for the world around it. The air was cooling fast. You could smell rain somewhere far off, maybe miles down the valley. The smoke from the fire curled straight up, no wind, just that heavy stillness that happens before night fully settles in. And that's when our dog stopped chewing his stick. His head snapped toward the tree line, not quick, but intentional. Ears up, body frozen. I followed his gaze, but saw only darkness. My girlfriend laughed nervously. He probably saw a deer, she said. But she didn't sound convinced. We turned the music down and listened. Nothing. Not even crickets now. I clicked on my flashlight, a small lead, and swept it across the trees. The light caught the thin mist drifting through the underbrush, glinting off branches like spider silk. The forest was still. I was about to lower the light when my dog let out a low, vibrating growl, a sound I'd never heard from him before. He lunged forward, muscles tight, the chain on his collar clinking softly as he hit the end of it. "Hey!" I hissed, reaching to grab him, but he was already locked on something. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. 2 or 3 at first, retreating deeper into the woods. Not a deer's run. Not the shuffle of a raccoon. Each step landed flat. Human-like. My heart jumped into my throat. I called my dog back. He hesitated, then retreated, hackles raised, a deep rumble still in his chest. My girlfriend whispered, "Let's just go inside." But I couldn't move. I needed to see. So I took a few steps forward, flashlight raised, knife in my other hand. The beam cut through the fog and caught a pair of eyes. Reflective, yellowish white, but too high off the ground. I froze. I've seen enough animals to know scale. This thing's eyes were maybe 6, 7 feet up, yet angled downward, like it was crouching. The light shimmered off something that looked like fur, matted, dark, but not uniform. The shape beneath it was wrong. Too long through the torso. Too still, for maybe 3 minutes. I just stared. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the fire behind me felt dimmer. My girlfriend whispered again, "Please, let's go." She reached for her phone and restarted the music, desperate for normal noise. I backed away slowly, keeping the flashlight fixed on those eyes until the trees swallowed them. As we walked downhill, I heard it again. Footsteps matching our pace. Not close, but there. And another set. Lighter. 2 things moving together. Our dog stayed between us and the woods, never taking his eyes off the dark. By the time we reached the cabin, the night felt thicker, like the air itself had weight. We slammed the door, locked it, pulled the blind shut. The dog planted himself at the window, chest heaving, ears flat. Outside, in the faint light from the porch bulb, I could just make out the slope of the hill, the edge of the tree line a few dozen yards away. Then, crunch, twigs breaking, something moving along the ridge. It circled the cabin slowly once, twice, always staying just beyond the light. For over an hour we heard it pacing, sometimes closer, sometimes farther. At one point, something brushed against the side of the RV wall. The hollow metal gave a faint thunk. My girlfriend was pale, whispering prayers under her breath. Our dog growled until he was hoarse. I stood there with my flashlight, willing something to step into the light. Anything, just to end the guessing. But nothing did. Round 2 in the morning, the noise stopped. The night went completely still again. I waited another half hour before I dared to open the door. The air outside was colder, the kind that bites the inside of your nose. Mist hung low around the trees. I scanned the woods. Nothing. Not a sound, not a movement. And yet, it felt like something was there, watching. The silence wasn't empty, it was listening back. We left at dawn the next morning. As we drove down the mountain road, I looked back once at that hill. There, just beyond the edge of the trees. I swear I saw a shape. Tall, motionless. Its head tilted ever so slightly as we turned the bend. I didn't tell my girlfriend. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online, crouching dog creature, upstate New York. The first image that came up looked exactly like what I'd seen that night. I closed the laptop. Haven't looked since. But sometimes, when I walk my dog near the woods behind my house, and the wind comes through the trees just right, I remember that sound. The footsteps that knew exactly how to follow without ever being seen. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Whether what I saw that night was the Dogman or something else entirely, I can't say. But the memory still follows me. I'd like to hear what you think. Have you ever seen something in the woods that didn't feel right, something that watched you back? Share your story in the comments, and maybe it'll find its way into a future episode. Because next time, we're heading somewhere colder, A stretch of highway where the lights go out and travelers disappear without a trace. Locals call it the Hollow Road. Until then, keep your eyes open. The shadows are never empty. I've always believed there's an explanation for everything. But some stories, they leave you wondering, not about monsters, but about the things we still don't understand. This one comes from Fergus Falls, Minnesota, early 2009. A quiet patch of farmland caught between the thawing rivers and the first whisper of spring. The man who told this story wasn't a believer in anything paranormal, not until that evening. He said it began like any ordinary day. He was staying at his mother-in-law's place, a small farmhouse tucked outside town. That late winter air still held the chill of February, the kind that makes the ground crunch beneath your boots, and every breath bloom like smoke. He was waiting for his wife and her mother to get back from town. They called him from the store, asked if he wanted to meet them for a 7 o'clock movie. He checked the time, just past 6:30, and decided to head out. He knew these back roads well. Wendell Road, 2 lanes of cracked asphalt that follow the Mustinka River. The kind of road where the light fades faster than you expect. Where sunset lingers behind the frozen fields, and the wind carries that scent of damp earth thawing beneath snow. 2 miles from the farmhouse, he saw movement up ahead. 3 white-tailed deer stood near the riverbank, 2 smaller yearlings, and a larger doe standing protectively between them. He slowed the truck, easing it to the side of the road. As an avid hunter, he'd seen deer 1,000 times, but never lost that quiet respect for them. He turned off the radio, rolled the window down, and listened. There was nothing but the distant trickle of the river and the whisper of the wind through the brittle grass. And that's when he noticed something else. At first, it was just a shape crouched low behind a bare tree trunk. He thought it might have been a stump or a shadow until he saw it shift. Just slightly. It was close, maybe 40 yards from the road, and it was watching the deer with a stillness that didn't feel right. He leaned forward over the steering wheel. Whatever it was tall. Even crouched, it loomed higher than the deer. And it wasn't on 4 legs. The creature's body was long and lean, built like a person. Broad shoulders tapering into a narrow waist. One arm rested against the tree for balance, and the hand had long, slender fingers that ended in dark tips. Almost human, but not quite. He told himself it was a trick of the light, maybe just a bear shifting its weight. But then it moved again. The last bit of sunlight was fading, turning the snow gold, then gray. In that soft dimness, he could see its head, the long snout catching the light, the faint outline of pointed ears. It looked like a wolf, but standing upright. It wasn't fidgeting or snarling. It was focused like a hunter, every muscle poised, every breath deliberate. And then the deer bolted. 3 flashes of white tails vanished into the brush. And in that same instant, the creature turned its gaze toward him. He said the moment their eyes met, he felt something cold pass through him, like realizing you were being watched long before you noticed. The eyes caught the last flicker of daylight. Amber, then red, then gone as the shadows deepened. It didn't run. It didn't attack. It just stared, a blinking, deliberate. as if sizing him up, or blaming him. He froze. He didn't know whether to drive off or stay still. And for what felt like an eternity, neither of them moved. Finally, the fear caught up with him. He slammed the accelerator, and the truck jolted down the road, tires slipping on patches of wet snow, his heart hammering in his chest. The drive back out to the farmhouse was quiet, the highway lights fading behind him until there was nothing but moonlight and frost. He wanted to believe he'd imagined it, that it was just the failing light and a hunter's tired mind. But something inside him needed to know. So, the next morning around 10, he went back. The sun hung low and cold, its light catching the melting ice on the fences. He parked by the roadside, grabbed his gloves, and walked toward the same tree. The snow there was shallow, the ground hard and dark from the freeze and fall. Under the tree, the snow was gone entirely. A bare patch of earth pressed flat. Something heavy had crouched there. He found 3 tracks leading up from the field. They were faint, 6 or 7 inches long, each print bearing the familiar pad and tongue marks of a canine. And something else, an odd spacing, a deeper impression at the heel, as though whatever made it hadn't been walking entirely on 4 legs. He followed them until they disappeared into the frozen dirt. He stood there for a while, listening to the wind roll through the empty fields. Crows called in the distance. The Mistinka River gurgled quietly beneath a thin film of ice. He said there was a strange silence in that place, the kind that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. No deer, no tracks but his own. Just that lingering thought. Had he seen an animal? Or something else entirely? He wasn't the kind of man to leap to conclusions. He'd hunted since he was a boy, knew the shapes and sounds of everything that roamed those woods. But that night, he saw something that didn't fit any pattern he knew. Something that shouldn't have been standing upright, watching deer. Later, when he told his friends, they laughed, said it was probably a bear, or his headlights catching the wrong angle. He tried to believe them. He wanted to believe them. But every so often, when the light hit just right, he said he could still see that figure behind the tree. That perfect stillness, that deliberate focus, and the eyes meeting his. He didn't call it a monster. He didn't even call it a Dogman. He just said it was something that didn't belong there. And since that day, he said the woods never felt quite the same. Maybe it was an illusion. Maybe it was something natural, seen from the wrong angle, in the wrong light. Or maybe, somewhere in those thawing fields of Fergus Falls, something ancient still walks between the rivers, seen only when the snow begins to melt, and the world, for a few quiet moments, remembers how to be wild again. Every story leaves us with questions. Was it a bear standing wrong, shadows playing tricks, or something else entirely? The Fergus Falls sighting remains one of those quiet mysteries that lingers halfway between reason and the unknown. Every story leaves a mark, and your support keeps those stories coming. Hit like if you felt the chill. Share this video with a fellow believer or skeptic, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The more you engage, the further we can follow these sightings into the dark. Some encounters never make it into reports. No official record, no log entry, no name on a line. Just stories whispered years later, long after the duty ends, when the night shifts blur together and memory becomes the only record that matters. This one came from an airman station just north of Duluth, Minnesota. He'd worked the night shift more times than he could count, and like most, he thought he knew every sound, every light, every shadow that belonged out there. Until one didn't. It was early September, 1999. The air carried that first chill of oncoming fall, crisp, still, with just a trace of lake moisture. The base sat at the far edge of Duluth's northern sprawl, pressed against miles of deep pine forest. Beyond the runways and hangars, nothing but dark timber and silence. It was early September, 1999. The air carried that first chill of oncoming fall, crisp, still, with just a trace of lake moisture. The base sat at the far edge of Duluth's northern sprawl, pressed against miles of deep pine forest. Beyond the runways and hangars, nothing but dark timber and silence. He drove an F-150 that night, part of the regular patrol rotation, checking doors, inspecting fence lines. Nothing unusual. He'd done this 100 times before. He knew how the headlights carved across the old baseball field, how the shadows fell against the trees, how the silence seemed heavier past midnight. There were no surprises here, or so he thought. Then it happened. As his truck crested a small incline on the north side of the property, something reflected back from the dark, two eyes glinting in the headlights. Not low to the ground like a deer, but high, almost eye level. He slowed, squinting through the windshield. They'd been talking about a huge buck roaming near the field, 16 points, maybe more. He thought, that must be it. Finally caught him. So he pressed the gas, curiosity replacing caution. The headlights sliced forward through the mist, toward the field that sat on the far side of the base. The baseball field was deserted, the ghost of summer games past. Grass overgrown, chain-link fence rattling in the wind. Beyond it, the land dipped sharply, a slope about 12 feet down, leading into heavy brush and thick timber. As his truck rolled closer, he scanned the slope. And then, something moved. He caught only the rear half of it, but that was enough. A shape large, powerful, leaping down the slope and vanishing into the brush below. The movement was fluid, deliberate, and far too fast for a deer. He blinked hard, trying to process what he'd seen. Long tail, maybe 2 feet or more. Hind legs like a dog, but massive, built with strength. The fur was light brown, wavy, thick, matted, glinting gold in the headlights. Then it was gone. Just a rustle of brush below, and the faint tremor of disturbed leaves. He sat there for several seconds, stunned, trying to convince himself it was a trick of the light, a shadow misread at high speed. But the picture was too clear in his mind, too precise. He knew what deer looked like. He knew what wolves looked like. This wasn't either. He whispered under his breath, "I know what I saw." But that couldn't have been what I saw. The base was quiet. No motion. Just the pulse in his own ears. Finally, he stepped out. rifle slung over his shoulder, flashlight in hand. The air was sharp and heavy with pine. His breath fogged in the bean as he stepped toward the slope. Every footstep on gravel echoed louder than it should have. He crouched at the edge, scanning the brush below. The ground dipped away into tangled undergrowth, waist-high brush hard to move through, even for a large animal. At first, nothing. Then, a sound. From deep in the trees, something was running. Fast? Heavy? He'd hunted deer before. He knew the rhythm of hooves on snow. This wasn't that. It was heavier, like a person charging through underbrush or something standing taller than it should. Branches snapped, one after another, like dry kindling. The sound was moving northwest away from the base. He aimed the flashlight beam, but it caught only movement, not form. Too far. Too fast. His pulse quickened. If it's some kind of wolf, he thought, my rifle won't do a thing. That was enough. He turned, bolted back to the truck, and climbed in. Doors locked. Engine on. The headlights lit nothing but empty air and swirling mist. He gunned the accelerator and sped back toward headquarters, the quiet roads suddenly too narrow, too dark. Behind him, the woods were silent again. When he reached the security forces building, the lights were almost blinding. He parked, hands still trembling slightly, and just sat there. The radio crackled normal traffic. Routine patrol check-ins. Nobody said a word about the north side. He never told them what he saw. Not the shift sergeant. Not the others who'd teased each other about seeing things out there before. Some stories you just don't share. When dawn came, he walked the same road again. The field looked different in daylight, harmless, almost small. But the slope still carried that uneasy feeling, as if the night had left a mark. He checked the brush for tracks. Most of the ground was hard-packed dirt, dark and frozen from cold nights. But near the base of the slope, where snow still lingered in patches, he saw them, 3 impressions. 6, maybe 7 inches long. Canine, but wrong somehow. For toe marks, spread wide like fingers. He stood there for a long time, staring at the prints until the wind began to fill them in with drifting powder. He didn't speak of it again. Not to anyone on base. Not even to friends off duty. Because on a military installation, stories like that have a way of following you. Years later, after he'd transferred, after the memory had dulled but never faded, he finally wrote it down. Anonymously. Just a quiet email sent into the void, describing what he'd seen that night outside the baseball field. And he ended it the same way so many witnesses do. I swear to be the truth. He didn't claim to see a monster. Didn't say it was a werewolf or anything supernatural. He only described what he'd witnessed, a large, upright, wolf-like thing that moved with purpose and vanished into the Minnesota woods. Maybe it was a misidentification, a trick of perspective, but the certainty in his words that still lingers. He knew his animals. He'd worked with the DNR, hunted, tracked, studied. He knew what belonged in those woods. And that night, something didn't belong. Maybe it was light. Maybe reflection. Or maybe it was something else. Something that's always been there. just beyond the edges of what we call ordinary. Whatever it was, it moved with intent. It carried weight, and in that brief moment, it looked back. That was the Duluth airfield encounter, one man's story from a quiet September night on the edge of the Northwoods. No proof, no photos, just memory and the echo of footsteps through trees. Maybe it was nothing more than a trick of the dark, or maybe something we're not meant to understand. If you've seen something, you know that silence too. Next time, we travel further into the Midwest, where a rural deputy's routine patrol turns into a midnight chase that still defies explanation. This report comes from an unnamed county somewhere in the rural Midwest, a flat stretch of farmland and forest where the night carries farther than the light can reach. It's said to have taken place sometime in the fall of 2006. The witness, the sheriff's deputy, filed no official report, no written statement. What's known comes from his personal notes he left behind for a friend years later. It happened in late autumn, just after harvest season. The nights had started to turn brittle, and the frost came early that year. He was working the midnight shift, a long stretch of empty roads and locals. The kind of shift where you see your reflection more often than another person. The deputy wasn't new to this. He'd worked nights for years, patrolling back roads, abandoned barns, quiet farmhouses. He was steady, grounded, the kind of man who didn't scare easy. But that night was different. It began just after 2 in the morning. The sky was clear when he started his route, but by the time he reached the northern edge of the county, a low fog had started to form. The kind that gathers without warning, settling in shallow dips of land like a living thing. Then came the call, faint, routine. A report from a rural farmhouse near the river bend. The caller said there was something moving out in the field again. Tall, fast. Not a deer. Not a coyote. They thought maybe a stray. Maybe a poacher. He acknowledged the call, turned the wheel, headed north. The gravel shifted under the tires, the road narrowing into a single-lane track that led between long fields of harvested corn. The fog thickened here, hugging the ground like smoke, rolling low and quiet. The beam of his spotlight looked weak against it. He passed a broken fence post, then another. When he pulled into the farmhouse drive, the place was dark. No lights, no movement, just the sound of the cruiser's engine ticking as it cooled. He stepped out. The air was sharp with cold, but there was another scent beneath it, something faintly organic, damp, like wet fur, or earth overturned. He called out once, but the sound didn't carry far. The fog seemed to swallow it whole. He swept the flashlight over the yard. The frost glittered faintly, the grass brittle underfoot. His breath curled out in small, ghostly puffs. He checked the outbuildings first. The barn doors were chained, the shed locked. Then he saw movement, something pale shifting between the trees behind the field. He turned the light toward it. 2 points glowed back, faint, reflective, and moving. Eyes, but they were too high, too far apart, and they didn't blink. He kept the light trained on them. trying to make out a shape. The fog pulsed faintly like it was breathing around the beam. Then they vanished. He stood there for a long moment, every sound exaggerated. The faint tick of the truck cooling, the dry whisper of frost melting under his boots. He told himself it was an animal, probably a deer catching the light wrong. But when he stepped toward the trees, he realized the ground was uneven, pocked with depressions he hadn't noticed before. Prints, not deep, but wide. 4 points splayed forward like toes, and a fifth one curling inward, like a thumb. He crouched down, tracing one with the light. The detail was strange claw marks, but spaced far apart, like fingers. Then something cracked in the woods, sharp, deliberate. He froze, flashlight fixed toward the noise. Another crack, then a low, rhythmic sound, a heavy, slow breathing. It was close. The deputy stood, scanning the tree line. For a moment, nothing. Then the fog shifted again, and there it was, just at the edge of sight. A shape, tall, narrow, its outline breaking the vertical rhythm of the trees. He said later, it wasn't the movement that scared him. It was the stillness, the way the thing stood upright, with shoulders that rose and fell with each breath. Then, in one slow step, it leaned forward. The eyes caught the light again, low amber, steady, intelligent, just at the edge of sight. A shape, tall, narrow, its outline breaking the vertical rhythm of the trees. He said later, it wasn't the movement that scared him. It was the stillness, the way the thing stood upright, with shoulders that rose and fell with each breath. Then, in one slow step, it leaned forward. The eyes caught the light again, low amber, steady, intelligent, just at the edge of sight. A shape, tall, narrow, its outline breaking the vertical rhythm of the trees. He said later, it wasn't the movement that scared him. It was the stillness, the way the thing stood upright, with shoulders that rose and fell with each breath. Then, in one slow step, it leaned forward. The eyes caught the light again, low amber, steady, intelligent. The shape turned in one smooth motion. It slipped sideways into the trees, not breaking branches, not stumbling, just gone. He stood frozen, like darting across the trunks. Every instinct told him to get back in the truck, but something in him wanted to see more, to understand what he'd just seen. So he followed. He stepped through the brush, frost cracking underfoot, the beam trembling over bark and grass. The woods were tight here, full of thin pines and birch. His breath came shallow, the fog thicker near the ground. Then he saw them again, tracks, deep, distinct, pressed into frozen soil. They led downslope, toward a creek bed. He followed slowly, every step careful. The only sound, water moving under ice. Then he heard it again. The breathing. He swept the light. Nothing. He took another step, and that's when the smell hit him. Sharp, earthy, metallic, like wet fur and rust. The sound came again, this time from behind. He turned fast and caught just a glimpse. Something moved between 2 trees, fast, powerful. The light caught its back for a split second, fur matted and thick, the color of wet straw. A shoulder, broad and shifting beneath muscle. Then the reflection of eyes again, closer than before. He stumbled backward, the beam catching the slope behind it. For a moment, the thing stopped. Its breath steamed in the light, slow, deliberate. Then, in a single motion, it dropped to all fours and moved impossibly fast up the incline and into the trees. He ran. Branches whipped past his arms, the radio cord tangled in his vest. By the time he reached the field again, his heart was hammering so hard he could barely steady the light. He stumbled backward, the beam catching the slope behind it. For a moment, the thing stopped. Its breath steamed in the light, slow, deliberate. Then, in a single motion, it dropped to all fours and moved impossibly fast up the incline and into the trees. He ran. Branches whipped past his arms, the radio cord tangled in his vest. By the time he reached the field again, his heart was hammering so hard he could barely steady the light. It was 3:17 a.m. He parked under a streetlight and sat there, engine running, headlights pointed at nothing. The heater clicked softly, trying to warm the air. He didn't speak, didn't radio it in, just sat there gripping the wheel, staring into the dark. The next morning, when the sun rose pale and cold, he returned. The fog had burned off. The field looked small again, almost harmless. He walked the fence line, slow, careful. That's when he found the bend in the wire, pushed inward, not pulled out. Near the slope, he saw faint marks in the frost. The same prints, softened by melt. They trailed into the woods and stopped near the creek. He followed them as far as he could. But something about the silence there made him stop. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of water now. Just stillness. He turned back. He never spoke of it officially, not once. But when asked years later, he said this: "There's something in those woods that walks when it shouldn't, and it knows exactly where the light ends." He transferred out of that county not long after, but those who knew him said he never drove through fog again. And maybe that's the part that lingers the most. Not what he saw, but what followed him home in the silence after. Because some roads stay with you long after the shift ends. And in places like this, where the fog rolls thick and the night runs deep, the dark doesn't always stay where it belongs. Tonight, we've heard 3 stories, 3 encounters separated by miles and years, but bound by something deeper. From the quiet backroads of Minnesota, where something moved just beyond the edge of the headlights, to the cold silence of an Air Force base, where a trained observer swore he saw more than any man should, and finally, to a nameless stretch of Midwestern farmland, where a deputy learned that sometimes the dark looks back. Each of them described something they couldn't quite explain, something that shouldn't exist but did, if only for a moment. Maybe these are fragments of fear, shaped by the night and the mind's need for answers. Or maybe there's still something out there walking the tree lines, waiting for the fog to rise again. The truth, it's still out there too, hiding somewhere between what we believe and what we refuse to see. If you've experienced something you can't explain, a sighting, a sound, a feeling that's never left you, I want to hear it. Share your story in the comments below, or reach out directly. Your encounter could be the next to appear here on Shadow Sightings. And if you've enjoyed tonight's episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it keeps these stories alive in the dark corners where they belong. Until then, keep your lights low, your mind open, and remember, shadows don't always move on their own.